Okay, let's get started. Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm very excited about our last event of the Setup for Success series that we're hosting in collaboration with BioAlberta. I hope you've enjoyed the series that we've put together, and I hope you've learned from it as well. But before we get started, I'd like to just, as we begin our event, I'd like to give land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on traditional territories in Alberta, here in our Edmonton chapter, which is hosting the event, of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. So we would like to put that out there. A little bit about our organization, if you haven't been in any of our events before. Our organization mission is to really just foster a culture of innovation within and around research and healthcare communities. And we hope to provide training for graduate students through career development events such as these and such as the series that we've put together to kind of enhance that commercialization mentality and industry mentality. And of course, we hope that through our event, we'll be able to link academia and government and industry, and we help you build your own network within that industry and connect with others and learn more about career path or how to get into the career that you want to, which we're going to learn about today. We are a national organization. We have many chapters. Most of them are in Ontario area, but we have our chapter here in Edmonton. And there's a chapter that's going to be started in BC next month. So look out for their events. Oh, sorry. I'd like to first thank our team for putting together this series and for helping out with all the events. And they're an amazing team to work with. And we're always happy to reach out. So please reach out when you can or when you want to. You can look at our website for more events, not only from our chapter, but from other chapters as well. I'd like to also let you know about the SWN Early Professionals Hub. There's usually a mentor every 2 weeks, and they talk about their career path and they answer questions that you might have. So check it out on LinkedIn. And this is our Edmonton chapter email if you have any questions for us. I would also like to bring your attention to the podcast that has been launched earlier last year by Dr. Bruce Seat, who's the founder and president of the Science to Business organization. I highly encourage you to listen to those podcasts. He hosts different speakers and you can find them on different platforms such as these. Last thing I would like to bring your attention to from our organization is the Science to Business Academy, which is sort of a spinoff from the Science to Business Network that we are part of. They partner with different organizations to provide training sessions and different courses to help you with your career. So this session right here, it's about Canadian pharmaceutical landscape. It's over a span of 4 weeks, 2 hours each week. And it's a great course that covers information about pharma industry from structure, organization, regulation, reimbursement, communication with healthcare professionals and patients. And I truly enjoyed that event when I took it last year. It kind of gives you an idea of the behind the curtains of that organization, something that I didn't have any information about because I haven't been part of that industry before. So it gave me that understanding of their operation. And the last part is a networking session with CEOs and GMs of big companies, so and fantastic leaders in pharma. So highly recommend. And if you need more information, you can contact me, or you can contact the organization, of course. Another great course that is actually headed by our speakers for today, Marcia and John, is You Are Your Story. So how to stand out in an interview. And it's an amazing course. It's a fantastic course. I learned a lot from it. You learn a lot about how to make a good story that you can use in an interview, and not just in an interview, and just networking in general. It's also a small number of participants. So they're only accepting 10 spots this year. So it helps really help you tell your story and kind of talk to others. And Marcy and John really truly help you deliver that material and be able to work on your skills. So again, if you would like more information, you can look into our website. Next, I'd like to thank our partners with this series, BioAlberta, and I'll hand it over to Trish to talk a little bit about BioAlberta.
Thanks very much, Mira, and hello everybody. And so nice to be back with John and Marcia. This is going to be a really great session. I just want you to know I got a chance to tune in the last time, and like the Science to Business Network crew says, it's backed by popular demand because it's important. I'm going to get a quick plug in before I kind of give some background on who BioAlberta is. We currently have 47 jobs available for students for summer with some really great Alberta companies that are looking for people with a science background. It's an opportunity for you to get your foot in the door. Today is the last day to apply for anything. So those of you that are listening, go to bioalberta.com. On the navigation bar at the top, if you see Boosting Biotech, if you click on that, all the jobs are listed down below, and it tells you, if you click on the links, who to send your resume to. So I encourage you to do so because today is closing day. Anyway, back to our agenda here. BioAlberta is the industry association focused on the life sciences, which includes biotech and health technology. We are a member-driven organization. We're member funded, and we're currently sitting at about 188 members. Our goal is to create and expand the network to connect small companies, researchers like yourselves, and startups with the supports and guidance that they need, whether it be policy, regulatory, or funding, or finding parts of the supply chain to make their products move where they need to go. We take pride in being able to navigate that ecosystem and to connect our members to the people that they need to grow and be successful. And with that, I'm going to turn it over back to Mira, or I'm not sure if you guys have decided if you're going to start with John or if you're going to start with Marcia, but away you go. Thanks so much.
I'm just going to introduce our speakers today. Thank you so much, Trish, for that. And yes, please look into the website for the internships if you're interested. Today is the last day. So now it's my greatest pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. As I mentioned, I've known them through the Science to Business Academy course, and they're both partners at CGC Education. So Marcy is a bilingual master educator and strategic communication specialist. Previously, she was an award-winning educational television producer and a teacher, which I find pretty cool. She has done many workshops both in Canada and the US to stakeholders, employers, teachers, and youth. And she has lectured at U of T, Brook University, and teaches strategic storytelling at my School of Global Affairs in Toronto. And she's actually a U of A alumni, so I thought I would say that too, since we're at U of A. Now, John is a learning designer and strategic communications professional. He graduated from London Film School and worked as a journalist and an award-winning playwright, which makes sense because you're great at telling us how to tell our stories. John has led the development of a landmark experiential learning programs for employees, teachers, and youth. He also served on faculties such as York University, Trent University, and Sentinel College. And with that, I'll give the floor to Marcy and John. And if you have any questions during the talk, please send them on the chat group. To me would be ideal so that we can moderate the questions after. So yeah, go ahead. I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Thank you, Mira. That's wonderful. John, are you going to share your screen now? I think you can. Hello, everyone. Have you got the screen up? Can you do it? We have to go back to that. Here we are. Okay, wonderful. Yes, I am a U of Alberta. It's my alma mater, and I'm very proud of it. So I'm thrilled to be back in Alberta, even if virtually. It is my home. So it's very exciting to be working with you guys. And it was funny because when we did that course, Mira, I wasn't people were coming from places that I didn't realize. I thought everyone was from Ontario. And when I found out you guys were from Edmonton, it was like, I should have been talking about that. But now I get to. So welcome everyone. We're hoping that you'll come away from this session with some new insights. And certainly if you want to further it, we are offering that course in May, and we'd love to welcome you to that month of 2-hour-a-week training, which I think the students found really worthwhile, as Mira said, and we made us very happy to be able to encourage you. Both John and I absolutely love scientists and science. Part of what we've done in our career in our company is support young scientists. And when we met Bruce Seat, Dr. Seat, who runs the Science to Business Network, that's where we bonded actually on providing a way for students to see the kind of science that's actually happening in Canada. And we know very well that there isn't enough sort of shout outs to you guys, to all the kind of amazing research that's being done in this country. And whenever we can, we really want to support that, because we realize that our country is built on your brains, and we're thrilled that you're bringing them to bear and helping us all in the kind of work you're doing. So welcome. John, would you like, yeah, so we'll start. I'll let John talk for a bit.
Thanks a lot, and thanks so much for having us. It's a real privilege to speak to you folks. We don't have a lot of time, so I think we'll just get into it. I mean, the idea, as Trish said, is to focus on the interview. I think we want to emphasize that getting an interview is an enormous achievement. And we spoke to Mira about this earlier, because there is a chance of 1 in 200 that you got an interview. So it's kind of like you've almost won the lottery, but you haven't quite. It's kind of like being nominated for the academies. You can see this is where most of the resumes go. And it's unfortunate that it happens this way, but it does. And I think this is why there's a lot of frustration. And part of what we want to talk about today is maybe how to overcome that frustration and not put so much emphasis on those resumes, because they're important. They're an important part of the picture, but there's lots of things you can do about that as well. And what Trish's organization is doing in terms of internships and getting to know companies is very important. That will help your resume stand out. But once you get your interview, you have to think, okay, what do I do now? And that's why we start with a word you may be acquainted with. Anybody seen this word before? I don't know. Strikes me as being a word you may have heard of. And that's kind of what we have to start with. Marcia?
Yeah, well, again, I think that word, I mean, it is your word, obviously, but the reality is that a lot of people don't, knowing how privileged you are to get an interview means you have to go to work. And I'm sure most of you realize this, but I'm going to emphasize is that once you get an interview with a company, you really should get to know everything you possibly can about that company. So obviously they have websites and things like that you can go deeply into. And also you can hopefully meet some people or at least have a chance to hear from some people in that company, often with these kinds of events, in fact, what they're working on and the kinds of things they want to do. Because you need to know, first of all, if you fit with that company. Hopefully you do, or you wouldn't be interested in that job. But nonetheless, that's partly why internships are so fantastic, by the way, because you get an internship, you get 4 months to learn whether that's really what you want to do. And it's funny, teaching at Global Affairs, teaching at the Monk School, we've had several graduate students say to us, I did a summer internship and I found out I really didn't like it. And it's been good because it was only after my first year and I could switch it up and actually go into the area that I found out when I was working, I actually really loved. So it gives you a bit of wiggle room. You're not stuck on a trajectory that you can't get off. At the same time, if you find that you are in a great trajectory, it gives you a great chance to meet people, learn about it. So again, before you go into that interview, go in armed with as much information and knowledge and a sense of the values of that that organization that you possibly can.
I think it's important too to interview the people, or to know about the people. This happened to us today, actually, because we run our own company, we have to research all the time. So what we do, we find out about the company, but really we try to find out about the people who are in that company. What is their background? What are they about? What do they like to do? Where do they come from? Because what you're trying to do above all is get inside their heads a bit to figure out how do they think. And when you've got an interview, you're one of 200 people, they've already decided that you're a person who could perhaps fit. So you've kind of gone through, you've crossed one big threshold there. Now, so they've already thought that you might fit. Your job then is to look for ways to decide if you do fit. And that's obviously you have to do. So learn everything you can about the company. You can't learn enough. You need to be able to almost feed back to that interviewer that what you know about the company, the things in ways that the interviewer may not even know themselves, because it's so important that you know that company inside out. It's fundamental. We had to do that today in a session. And in our work, we're always interviewing, we're always auditioning, because we're always seeking new clients. And every new client, you have to be able to say who you are, what you're about, and find a way of connecting. And that's exactly what you're doing in an interview. So when you're looking at a company, why do they do what they do? This goes back to, and anybody who hasn't seen the Simon Sinek video must, because in the end, you need to know, why do they exist? Why does this company exist? You know, it's usually we've heard some people say, well, I exist because I make money. Well, that's not really why you're there. You're there to do something very specific, and it may come from a certain technology that you've invented. It may come from a belief system. It may come from a worldview. It could come from a whole range of things, but you need to know why they're doing what they're doing and what they believe in. There's a traditional thing in business about mission and vision. Today, it's more about what's the higher purpose of a company? What's the thing that brings them together? Because everybody needs a higher purpose in order to feel as though they're accomplishing what they can accomplish. And what do they do? I mean, you need to know what kind of services you need. We were talking to a company today that looked like a health promotion company, but in fact, they're a technology company. They have a platform that they're actually selling into to different groups. So you may think it's one thing, and then you find out, actually, no, they're a tech company. You know, it's like trying to establish where exactly they lie in that. And now you have to consider, are you committed to really work? This is all before this interview, before you've even decided. You've got to really make sure you know that you're committed to doing this. If you're not committed, then, oops, it's like being nominated for an Oscar. And as you know, if you're an Oscar, it can be pretty scary. In my dream, I'm in a large auditorium surrounded by people. They're all looking at me. And that's when I realize I'm completely naked. Because that's what you go through in an interview. You're exposing yourself.
In a good way. But it's interesting because we just had this experience today, so we can talk. I mean, we're seasoned, okay? We've been doing this for years. We've been auditioning for years and years. And what you learn is we do exactly what we're telling you about. We prepare, we read their websites, we find out as much as we can about the people. And then sometimes when we're, having our audition, if you like, we learn more things. But this is about preparation. So just make sure, again, because you are going to be, you want to go in armed, you want to go in clothed. Let's put it that way, with your knowledge. And if you can, practice. Sometimes we don't practice with one another other than just talking about it, because we work together. So we're always talking about all these various things. But if you can't do that, if you can find someone to talk to, have a family friend doing something like that, have a Zoom call with someone, get them to interview you, just so you feel comfortable enough when you're on the Zoom, because it will be probably a Zoom interview at this point, that you're comfortable talking to somebody on Zoom, and you kind of feel that this can be your space. You're not too nervous. You'll be nervous, but you won't be too nervous.
So we're going to get more into the interview questions, and Mira has some questions we're going to get to in a little bit. But there's three basic interview questions. I mean, three basic groups of interview questions that we're talking about here. The one is, can you perform? Can you do the job? And there's manifestations of this, different manifestations of this. Are you really keen? Are you really interested in what this organization is about? And again, there's a range of questions around that. And then, do you fit? Obviously, the interviewer or the organization feels as though you're a possible fit, or you wouldn't be heading for that interview as one of 200 people. So there's already some sense that you have a potential fit. But a lot of people say, oh, I didn't get the job, and you beat yourself up. But if you don't fit in an organization, there's only so much you can do about that. You can't fit yourself into a situation. So don't blame yourself. You're entering a structure. You're entering, there could be, only 3 people in that company. There could be 3,000 people in that company, but they've built up a culture, and they want to make sure that they're bringing in people who they know can be part of that culture. And for some reason, it just may not be you. And there's nothing wrong with that. There will be another organization where you do fit. So it comes down to your capabilities, your interests, and value. What value do you bring? And we're going to address this a lot more, but I think it's important to see that when you're entering an organization of some sort or company, you're bringing something to help. You're bringing a value that you want something to help something happen inside that organization. So you're facilitating something, you're helping make something happen. So it's not about you, and we'll get into this some more too. It's not about you, it's about what you can bring and what you can offer that matters. So that's the value you're going to be bringing forward. And there's 2 basic kinds of questions: the behavioral questions, which you mostly will get. Tell me about a time when. And virtually all of the questions you will get in an interview are these kind of behavioral questions. And that's why storytelling is so fundamental, because if you're not able to talk about situations that were challenging for you, where you helped a team work, or where you did some great work that you're proud of some things, or you showed a weakness, that if you're not able to address those things through story, you're not going to be able to respond to these behavioral questions, because they're really fundamental to what you'll face. And then the hypothetical questions: what would you do if? And this again is the other side of the coin, and you need to think about, okay, potentially you can only apply your experience to this. If they come up with questions like, how many jelly beans are in a school bus, you have to say, well, if I had that question, this is how I would find a solution to that. And that's all you can do, is just look for ways of using your experience to apply to a hypothetical future situation. So how do you answer your questions? And this is why we emphasize story.
Yeah, the whole idea here, it's again part of this preparation, is, and this is what we do in the course, we get people to talk about stories of these sorts. What happened to you? They'll ask you something, of course, like, what's your weakness? And it's a terrible question, but everyone faces it. And there's a great way of turning it into a positive, in that you have to examine, like, what is that? And think of a story where you can illustrate it. And again, with story goes straight to the heart. And you guys, some of you guys are neuroscientists, so you understand neural coupling. We always show in our story course how that happens, and how when you tell a story, someone links up. And if you tell a good story, that person is linking neurally with you. And so that sense, they kind of live through your story, and they feel an empathy for you that comes out of that story. So how you structure the story is important, but again, that you tell a story is important as well. So you don't just talk about, well, I'm good at this. You tell a story where they pick up how good you are at that, or what kind of thing you had to overcome. and all of the attributes that therefore flow from that story, that they will make up their own mind about you using that story.
In the end, the story will be memorable. I mean, it's not your attribute. They will pull the attributes out, as Marcy said, but it's the story that's memorable, and that will make you stand out in the interview. Again, you're one of 200. You might be one of the 4 or 5. You know, you're nominated for the Academy Awards, but you haven't won the award. You weren't given the Oscar yet.
I'm going to tell a quick story because it's appropriate. I have a nephew who was an extremely handsome, athletic, and brilliant kid. Okay, and he knew it. Went to after he did his master's degree, he went for a PhD, and he was turned down. And he'd never been turned down for anything in his entire life, and he wanted to be a doctor. But he was like saying, I'm going to be doctor. I'm going to do both things at the same time. I'm going to be, I'm so cool. Anyway, he was crushed. So he kind of picked himself up and put himself through an experience where he actually started washing the feet of homeless people and started working for an agency that took care of homeless people. He volunteered to begin with, got a job, and his job was to take homeless people or people with difficulties, and they weren't all homeless, but take them around to their doctors and get their medications and make sure that they were taking them, basically to monitor and support these people. He did that for a couple of years, all while applying to med school, and he got rejected 3 times. And on his 4th try, he came to us and said, like, what am I doing wrong? And we said, why don't you tell your story? Why don't you talk about what happened to you, that you were basically very sort of, your head was full of yourself. You needed to be humbled. You were humbled. You started realizing what most people went through in life, which was hard. And you started learning empathy, and you realized you had it already, but it really grew that in you. And tell that story when you're in your applications. Well, I'm happy to say he got in and is now actually a practicing physician and a very happy guy. But he had to go through that. He had to tell that story so people could understand that here's this guy that looks so great, but actually has gone through some really difficult times and pulled himself out of them and learned some very deep lessons. So it connects you. And Antonio Damasio is a neuroscientist, and his whole thing is, we aren't machines. We have feelings, and we have to touch into those feelings for people to recognize us and recognize themselves in us. And this is something I remember saying to a group. We were doing a group of water technologists. We were talking about storytelling with this group of Ontario water technologists, and really some really amazing inventors in the room, actually. And when we started talking about how decisions are emotional, a woman came up to me afterward and said, that I've never heard that in my life, and yet it makes the most sense. And it's true. All the research shows this. You make decisions. The people whose emotional part of the brain has gone can't make decisions. And basically, people starve. I mean, there's some really good constructs, Beridian's ass, and a few like that, where they show, take the part of the brain away, the decision-making part, and put a donkey between 2 areas of food, 2 feedlots, and they starve to death because they can't decide which one to eat. So, there's some really great research on this, but you have to realize that is truth. So they're making a decision about you that's an emotional decision. They'll rationalize it afterward, but it's an emotional decision, and you have to plug in. So this is why the challenge or obstacle story is the most important one, because you want these people to feel you. You want them to feel the challenge you went through. It doesn't have to be terribly personal. It can be, if you feel comfortable and if you think it's relevant. But again, every one of us faces obstacles all the time. And if you faced a good obstacle and it was really hard for you, but you found a way through it, and you can show that you grew as a person, that tells other people so many things about you that just saying, well, I'm a team leader, that doesn't say anything. It's showing them how you were a team leader, how you took that team from A to B and maybe on to C, that really matters. So this is a
Here are just typically 3 questions that you could get in an interview. These are questions taken. A lot of companies like Google actually have set interviews that they put everybody through. And then of course they've got reams of algorithms around these things because they only think in terms of algorithms. So they've done set interviews and then they've matched that up with a range of responses that they think would be appropriate for, again, people with the appropriate fit. So tell me about a time when you effectively managed your team to achieve a goal. What did your approach look like? That's the kind of question you're going to be facing. And again, it's important to think about these questions and think about the kinds of stories that you need to have in your back pocket to respond to them. And it's important to say that, you know, you have a challenge here, and the challenge comes from an issue your team was facing, and you had to find a way of negotiating yourself and that team through that challenge.
And you know, it can even be your childhood or your high school. It doesn't have. Some of you haven't led a team before. Maybe it was a summer job you did. You know, a friend of ours had a summer job where she had to take somebody on a canoe trip that was very damaged emotionally and had not only had autism but a whole bunch of very serious issues on a canoe trip. And how did you manage that team to get them all on the side of this person who was in fact having very difficult issues? But she was able to bring them all around to understand and have empathy for this person. And they actually did it. They went on an amazing canoe trip together. And instead of it being a negative, it was a positive. But again, it's because she brought the team around to understanding and did some activities with them. So whatever you've done in your life, there has got to have been a time when that has happened. And of course,
you will also encounter situations like this, yeah, where it may be obvious what you're bringing to the company, but if you don't tell a story about it, you're not going to overcome all those 10 guys in suits, and that's pretty unpleasant. So tell me about a time when you had your behavior had a positive impact on the team. Another, you know, behavioral question that's very typical. When were you able to really take, and these are things that we did in our course, and Mira and others came forward and talked about times in working with their teams at the university and doing research about, you know, how you were able to pull together a team and influence a team so they could, again, overcome obstacles. These are all kind of obstacle questions in a way. They all fit into that similar bag of questions. And this is a typical question too. We talk about your weakness question. We know that there's going to be a weakness question. You're going to be asked, what's your greatest weakness? And we're going to get into that a bit more with the question and answer part, but just expect it. And don't, we had a colleague who went through an interview, and when a weakness question came up, she was taken aback and she couldn't think of a weakness. Well, needless to say, unfortunately, she didn't get the position because we all have weaknesses. Even Superman has weaknesses. You just have to assume that's going to be coming your way. Another question, tell me about a time you had a difficulty working with someone. What made this person difficult to work with you? These are very tricky questions because as we discussed in this course we did, you don't want to appear as though you caused the difficulty. You have to turn this into a positive situation. But we all know that we're going to be working with some colleagues who may be an obstacle, who may not make it work. And as it turned out, one of the people in the course, Chelsea, told a story about a difficult obstacle with another person. She pulled together and she turned that story into a real positive. And she recently applied for a job, and apparently she used some of these stories and she got the job. So we were so pleased for her because she tackled this difficult question in a way that made it a positive outcome for her. This is a whale. What happens, his biggest weakness? No, he's working too hard.
I think this is one of the great stories, you know, and why story is interesting. You guys, we all know story, right? We all want to read about, you know, something happens and how do you overcome it? It's the paradigm. It's the Joseph Campbell paradigm for all stories. They're universally, everything we watch on TV, every film we watch, somebody's got to go through some kind of difficulty and they've got to overcome it. And that is kind of the basic story that everyone wants to hear. And this in business is essentially the story too. Enduring setbacks while maintaining the ability to show others the way to go forward is the true test of leadership. And if you can tell your people that you were vulnerable, that you found you had to endure setbacks, and you can explain what those setbacks were in a way to show that, you know, they'll be listening for what you did, how you managed it. That's what they're going to be listening for, because they're going to want to model what you've done. So it's always important to realize that setbacks are not a bad thing. You know, no one's had a perfect life. We've all made mistakes. We've all had things that confronted us that we thought we'd never be able to overcome, but we've all done it. And so those are the stories you want to make to focus on when people ask you these questions.
So it isn't about you. And I think this is a very difficult thing for folks to realize. It's what you can do for others. You have worked incredibly hard to get to the positions that you're in. You've worked like crazy in an academic environment with your research. You felt the stress of all of that. You've reached a certain level, but in the end, you need to take what you've learned in all of those skills and find a way of transferring them in an environment outside of academics where you can help facilitate someone else's success. And this is a difficult transition sometimes for people because you've been focused in your own success. But now you need to find a way of taking that success that you've achieved and helping someone else be successful. So it isn't about you. It's about what you can do for other people. And that is, if with that attitude, you'll be able to go into an interview much more confident and also with a sense of awareness that you're there to help the company you're interviewing for. It's not about you getting a job, okay? The company doesn't care if you get a job. They don't. They want to know what you're going to do for them. That's really fundamental, you know. It's very important to switch that around and think in those terms. So it's about what you have done for others in the past, which I know all of you have because you've all worked with difficult situations, and what you will do for the company. So that is something that they will ask you those kinds of questions, but it's important to sandwich that in. And we're going to talk a little bit about strategic communications. If you think about an interview as an opportunity for strategic communications, it's important to use the questions they give you as an opportunity to tell them your story. Don't let the questions push you back and you being on your hot heels thinking, oh, how do I figure that out? You want to make sure you're confident enough to know what your story is and you can get that story out to them. So how do I look? Marcy, how do I look?
Not bad.
Could be better.
It's evening. Well, this is something you always get, right? How do I look at interviews? And we talked about this last time, but I think it's worth repeating because many of you weren't part of it. One of the things that is really important, again, it goes back to that element of research. Who are these people I'm going to be working with? So if I'm working in a really sort of, and I can know this by looking at the people in the pictures on their website, maybe I've heard a few people speak, I get a sense of their vibe. Is it laid back? Does people come with t-shirts and jeans to work? Or is it, you know, fairly buttoned down? People wear suits? Is it more, you know, so-called professional? I don't really think that term, especially in the Zoom world, I don't know if that term even works anymore. But what you want to do is feel confident in yourself, but also if you're working for a company, they want you to sort of fit in, let's face it. So, you know, just make sure you kind of dress like them. You've got to, you know, if they wear suits, you can wear a suit, even if it's like just a suit jacket, then especially on a Zoom call, that's fine. Just make sure there's a bit of a mirror. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to change your look completely. But again, if you have bright purple hair and, you know, are covered with tattoos, and I know some people like that. You know, if you want to kind of get a job in a really buttoned down pharmaceutical company, not that that is necessarily a bad thing, that you have bright purple hair and have tattoos, but perhaps you wear a shirt to cover the tattoos that day. Maybe you tone your hair down a bit if you want, or you wear your hair. Again, that can be you, and that's cool. But again, just know that you're going to work with people that you want to fit in a little bit at least. Okay, so you set the stage. I think that means basically that you make sure, you know, we show this image of Vermeer because he was just the most extraordinary painter of light, probably the best in the world. Look at him, look at the light, how he's managed to have that light cast on that person. And really that's what you want to do. You want to have a nice light cast on you. So try, it's hard in the Zoom world. We're all kind of, you know, struggling to look good on Zoom. You can Google a whole bunch of things. By the way, there's lots of stuff out there, how to look good on Zoom, but you know, just look at yourself a bit. Make sure that you know, your hair's combed and you feel confident enough in your look, and make sure the lighting puts a nice sort of shine on you and doesn't take away from you. I think that's a very important thing. Sometimes people come out of the dark, or they have a weird background. Sometimes you'll have a Zoom interview with somebody or a call with somebody and they have the beach in the background. Well, that can actually, they think it's funny, but it can be incredibly distracting when you're trying to actually call them and have a conversation about something serious. So just, you know, think about those elements that you really want to keep it, you know, keep the light looking on you properly. Make sure you look good in, you know, as good as you can. In the light the light that shines on you.
And think about your background, because you know, people, there's a lot of work about nonverbals, and we'll talk a little bit about that, I think, in this. But it's not what you say, but it's the image you're presenting. So as with Vermeer, he spent a lot of time putting things in the background that had significance, such as the globe, the map. I mean, and you look at this painting's called The Astronomer, and he's looking out, and behind him you see the globe, and you think he's thinking about the globe. You know, so people get, it's through mise-en-scène, they get impressions about what you're thinking about by what you see. And if you look at Zoom nowadays, everybody's rearranging their bookshelves to make sure that, you know, Finnegan's Wake stands out, because it somehow indicates that they know James Joyce, although I don't think anyone's really actually read the book. How shall I act? Marcy?
Well, again, I think you should be comfortable. Zoom has changed the way we relate to people quite significantly, actually. You know, I'm relating to you guys right now. I can't see you, so it's very hard because you actually can't. You aren't getting the normal cues that you get from any kind of interaction with someone. So whether it's one-on-one or if you're facing a panel in an interview, or you're in a big room, any of those kinds of things have gone out the window when you're having a Zoom call. You'll have a few images of people, but there won't be the same impact. So the only advice I can give you advice in the sense that you should speak clearly. I think part of the thing that happens is the fact that people, you know, don't necessarily know how to speak to Zoom. Try and, like I'm doing right now, try and look at the camera, because it's the camera that's taking your image into the room with the people there. So the only eye contact I can make right now is eye contact with that camera, and hopefully you can see me talking right at you. I'm not very comfortable doing that still. I take the world's worst selfies. My children will tell you I'm the world's worst selfie taker, partly because I really don't know how to look at the camera properly. But this is something, you guys are young, you're much more used to this, and you can practice this. So practice looking at the camera, have enough distance between you and the audience that you're not too close or too far away. So there's kind of a sweet spot where they can see part of your body, they can see your background, and they feel comfortable with you. A lot of this is just a comfort thing, and people will feel comfortable with you if you feel comfortable, a comfortable distance from them. So these are the kind of final kind of things that we want to talk about, that in any interview, part of what, I mean, we're talking because this is the presentation that we're giving you. But normally we would be listening too, because we want to hear from you. We want to hear what you, and that's why we like doing this course, because we get to hear your stories and you get to hear each other's stories, which is very important. But that's the first thing. So when you're in an interview, you listen and try. And again, if you've done your research, you are looking to find some common ground with that person. And there's lots of research on how when you've gone into a meeting, having done your research and you can find some common ground, you are much more successful at connecting with that person. Find something in common.
I think there's a tendency to want to blurt things out and answer things too quickly. So I think you need to just hold yourself back a bit and listen first. And even sometimes maybe not talk about the immediate thing. We had a friend who actually was admitted to a medical school, and part of the reason she was admitted is because she in the interview shared a love for Bach. So, and they both played piano. So their love for music actually set the tone for the entire interview, and the rest was on the way. So we've looked at, there's a lot of questions that people will be asking, and Mira will be asking shortly, but it's so important that, I mean, no one can give you a tip about how to answer a question. You have to be yourself. You know, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the ideas we have, but in the end, it's you who's going to be doing the job. It's you who's in the interview. So make sure you're being honest and authentic. And don't be afraid of being a little bit open to talk about something that is real for you. Because in the end, decisions are emotional, and your commitment to something is very powerful. And that the power of that commitment wins the day so often in these situations. It's also important to be brief and confident. Too often, if you talk about stories, people think, oh my God, am I going to hear somebody talk for like 12 hours and I'm going to hear all the details about the blades of grass they walked on? Obviously, you don't want to do that. You want to make sure you can find ways of bringing this down to a minute and a half. If it goes past 90 seconds, you know you've probably lost people. And you can do a good, impactful story in a short period of time. I use the word impactful. Please whip me later. That's a bad thing. But you want to know what you want to say. The Wonder Woman pose. Marcia, you're...
Well, we're just going to talk a little bit about, you ask, again, you're sitting in a Zoom room and, you get really comfortable, but you still want a little bit of an edge. And I think, you're going to have an edge because you know that some part of your life is kind of hanging on this. You want this job, you're getting your interview, you're prepared, but there'll be a little bit of nervousness, and how you kind of help to make yourself feel better and how you can go in feeling really strong is doing the Wonder Woman pose. Now there's a wonderful researcher called Amy Cuddy, and I think Mira, you'll probably post that TED Talk again for everyone. It's a marvelous TED Talk about the importance of nonverbals and how we're primates. We respond to nonverbals. And so you want to make sure your nonverbals are confident and assured, so the person watching you feels that comfort level too. And one of the things you can do that's very successful is do the Wonder Woman pose, which is standing up and putting your hands on your hips. And is it for 2 minutes, I think, John?
Yes.
It's for 2 minutes. You stand as strong and high as tall as you can, and time yourself. And what that's doing is changing your hormone levels. So it's lowering your cortisol, and that's important, and it's upping your testosterone. So again, letting you feel powerful as powerful as Wonder Woman happens to look right there. So again, there are techniques you can use. Have a look at the Amy Cuddy TED Talk that Mira, I know, will post. I think you posted it last time, Mira. So if you can't, certainly I can probably find it too, but it's a TED Talk by Amy Cuddy, and she's a brilliant researcher, and she talks exactly about how to get ready for things and how to prepare. And the Wonder Woman pose is one really good one. So here we're about having 3 stories, and we've done this program many, many times. And one group we did it for was a group of business people. They were sort of small to medium-sized enterprises. This guy was an engineer, a process engineer who had about 200 people in his employ. And he actually was from Iran. And he said, and when he took our course, and it was a kind of went over several weeks. And he said, after this, I just realized in our culture, we tell stories all the time. I just didn't think I could in the North American setting. But he said, now that I have a kind of license to tell my stories, I have developed 3 essential stories, and I keep them in my back pocket, and I use them. I pull them out to connect with people, to get business. And he said it's been hugely successful for him to realize the power of stories. So if you can come up with 3 essential stories after this program, before you do your interviews, try to get 3 really solid stories out of yourself, overcoming obstacles, how you've made change, how you've improved other people's lives, the kinds of things you've done for others, then that's a really wonderful thing that you can have. And you'll have those stories and work them in when you can. Not always necessarily, answering the question, although that'll happen, but make sure you kind of find a way of getting those stories in during the interview.
So people want to know about you, but they want to know your story. And they've already got your resume, so you don't need to recite your resume. You've already gone through that process of being selected. So they want to know who you are, and they want to know what your story. They want the emotional connection, and they want that reality, that authentic feeling from who you are.
Okay.
So we do this. I'm afraid we can't do this in this environment, but we always like to find out, and maybe it's something for you to think about, is what can you do from our discussion today? How can you apply what you've learned? Now, maybe Mira will pull this up on the chat site, but we're certainly able to discuss this. What do you take away? What did you find interesting about what we've discussed, and how will you apply what you've learned from what you've heard? Because as Teddy Roosevelt always says, even though he's not with us anymore, but his words live on, nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's being used a lot, but it really rings true. It's your caring that makes the difference, and that's what will transcend everything else. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you. And I know, Mira, you had some questions that other people had sent in. And by the way, if you want to look us up, we just actually launched our new website today. Or yesterday, I think it was this morning, I put it up on LinkedIn. And please feel free to link in with us if any of you'd like to. We'd love to expand our connections with people who are doing brilliant work. But we also, we would love very much to connect. So, keep it going. But Mira is going to, I know you've got some questions, Mira, that some of the people sent in last time, and we're really happy to answer those. So if you want to sort of shoot those questions at us, and they're probably questions, as I think I was reading Simon Sinek today, he said, be the idiot. Like, be the idiot in the room, ask the question, because nobody wants to ask those questions, right? We're all scared to ask questions because we seem stupid. And in fact, if you're thinking a question, you probably, several people in the room are thinking the same thing. So if you ask it, you end up being the hero. And some people ask some very good questions.
Definitely true.
It is true.
It's very obvious in research too. It's very obvious in research. Someone would ask a question like, I was thinking that, but I didn't want to ask it.
No. Well, that is Simon Sinek's whole new thing, saying, why are we wasting time? Just ask the question. Feel, you're not stupid. People who have questions means they're curious. Like, why do we have this idea that we're stupid if we ask a question? So, no, it's great. But you had some great questions, Mira, and we're happy to answer those if people here would like to hear the answers to those.
Yeah, of course. So I was just going to say that I know we're getting close to 5, but the conversation is very interesting. So I think we're just going to keep going. You're welcome to join off, and we're sorry that we're going over time, but I think we're just going to maybe ask a few questions and then then close if people want to stay on and talk. I don't know what your time availability, but it's definitely an interesting. It's definitely an interesting conversation. Perfect. So I think one question that stood out to me mostly is like, if you're in an interview and you think, like, what are red flags sort of to kind of cues that you can tell that the interview is not going as well as you might think it should be, and what can you do to kind of change that?
That's a good question. And this person we were talking about who didn't get the job. It's interesting because she told me afterwards, she said she was very excited about having had the interview. She said it was so fast, it went so quickly, and they were really nice, but they didn't. And I said, did they ask you a lot of questions? She said, no, and they didn't. But they were such nice people. And she went on, I thought, you didn't get it. You know, when an interview goes really quickly and people kind of want to close it down, it's a good sign. That doesn't always mean that, but it is often a good sign that they've already made their decision and it's a no. How do you flag that? Well, again, you can tell if someone's interested in you. You know, if they're looking at you, if they're listening to what you're saying. And one of the people we know who's kind of our sage, she's young, but she's an extremely wise person, and she has a technique that she uses in interviews. She asks the interviewer, am I being clear? She puts them, you know, did I answer that question the way, you know, you expected? Did you get the kind of answer you wanted from me? Like there's a way of kind of trying to find out whether you're actually reaching people. And sometimes you can be quite direct and say, was that clear to you? And if not, what else could you ask me that would make it clear, whatever it happens to be? And she said it's a really interesting technique because it really engages them. All of a sudden, they're just not the guy pushing questions at you, but you've asked them a question. Mm-hmm. So that's a way of engaging people. And sometimes when you feel you've lost the connection, if you can find a way of engaging them again, you might be able to get that back.
The red flags are typically, you know, people are distracted, they're not listening. They might even give you career advice. They might, I guess Marcy said, the interview might be incredibly short. So their decision has been made up. So yes, always asking questions, you know, try to make it a dialogue if you can. And I think, again, we go into interviews and I think we're immediately in a defensive posture. If we can find a way of going in and making it a dialogue, it creates more opportunity. So you asking them questions is great. Changing the subject, sometimes when things are really going bad, you know, change tack. Just think of yourself sailing. I'm sailing down this road, I'm hitting some rough water, I better change tack. And that's what you have to do. Just say, okay, I'm going to just go off over here. But above all, you need to remain positive. It's very hard. You know, positivity is one of those things. Can you invent positivity? Can you become positive if you're not? I don't know. I mean, a lot of these things come down to your character, but all of you who've gone through so much in academics to get where you are have to have some sense of positivity about what you've done and what you've accomplished. Hang on to that positivity. Positivity begets other positivity. You can turn an interview around by simply being so positive about what you can bring to somebody. They're taken aback until they start to become positive. You know, it really starts to become this force field. So don't be afraid to try to take over that room with your own positivity and keep that positive atmosphere.
Good. That's really good. We just had a question, which is, I think is something worth, I think you also have this question, Mira. How do we talk about money in an interview, right?
Especially since like many of us are just, maybe this is their first job and it's kind of a sensitive subject. You don't know how much you can negotiate with things like that. So it'd be interesting to know what the answer is.
Well, you know, and I think one of the really important things to realize is that, first of all, if you've done your research, you kind of know the categories within which you will work, right? So if you're going for a job at Best Buy, which I'm just joking about, but I'm saying, you know that probably your first job at Best Buy, you'll be making minimum wage. If you're going for a job at a pharma company, you'll probably expect a salary and a mid-range salary for the work you're doing. And that's where it's really important to look, research, find out what people make in that. And you can usually do that. You know, there's sunshine lists, there's ways of talking to people, like what is the general salary range? I mean, obviously, with the experience you have, they're not going to pay you minimum wage. So you've got a right to ask for, something substantial, but it's, again, what are you going to contribute? And I think it always goes back to what do they want you to contribute to the organization, and how can you fit into that. Obviously, at the very beginning, often people don't get the high salaries. They have to work for a while, but don't take a low salary either. I mean, if they ask you what you expect, then go for a mid-range salary, because they will. But know what that mid-range is within that company. And as someone said, your first job often will kind of shape what salary levels you end up with throughout your life. That is actually quite well known. And so, you don't want to take the low. People will always probably try to get you at the least expensive rate, but it's your sense of value of yourself and what you're contributing. So make sure you know what you're offering, and talk about what you're giving them, what you're doing for them, so that they recognize your value.
And just one last point about this. Our general sense is it's not advisable to negotiate salary in that first interview. You don't want to it becomes a real rabbit hole, and you get into too many details, and don't do that. But I mean, if people say, if your interviewer brings it up and said, we're offering 75,000 for this job, is that the kind of range you were thinking about? You should be in a position to say, I understand that's the position, that's the range for this position. So you feel comfortable entering a world where you know what that's like. And obviously there's benefit packages and a range of other things that come with it. So you have to be aware of that, but you can't go in expecting $250,000, but you have to go in knowing what the average salary is. One of the people we know is a chemist, and she started to work at a drug discovery company. And she said postdocs at the drug discovery company were earning $75,000. So you have to know that this is the kind of range you're going into, and that's what you have to expect. So make sure your expectations are in line with what you know is going to be coming your way.
And you can always ask, if they give you something, we'll say, well, this is what I'm bringing to the table. What kind of value does that have for you? And how much is that worth to you? So there's a sense of it's not just them asking you, but you asking them.
Thank you. And I know you touched a little bit on what's your weakness question in an interview. And I think that's a question that a lot of us think a lot about. And I was wondering if you could give an example of a good answer and what would be considered the bad answers, so that everyone has it in perspective.
Yeah, that's always.
It's a hard question.
But it comes up each time. John, you had we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, first of all, you have to think about typical weaknesses that you can turn to a positive. I mean, for a lot of people, I know people in research, they get very buttoned down, and sometimes, especially when you're getting an academic research, you're looking at things in a micro level. And so you get extremely detail oriented. And a weakness can be something such as, I sometimes get so involved with the details that I lose perspective. That's an appropriate weakness. It shows that, first of all, you are someone who's working very hard to ensure you're very diligent, and that's great. But it can be a negative thing because it's too much, looking at the trees and not the forest. So if you identify that as, say, a problem, it's important to say, because I know I have that issue, I make sure that I step back occasionally. I know that I get too detail oriented, so I found a way to deal with that in my own life and my own work. And I step back occasionally and I try to just map it all out and then just get the big picture. And that allows me to kind of see where it's all going and how it's all coming together. And then I can zoom back in again. So identifying a weakness is very, very important, because you have to know yourself. You have to know what trips you up. Some people are impatient. Some people procrastinate. Everybody has something that happens. But then you need to talk about how you can govern yourself. Self-regulation is fundamental in success, in school and everywhere else. So how do you regulate yourself? How do you figure out a way to deal with this? And as long as they know that you're tackling your weakness and that you're human, that's great. But to go in there and say, I don't have a weakness, or my weakness is donuts, is not going to fly. You know, it has to be something that really is intrinsic to you and who you are. So it's hard to prescribe that, but just think about what trips you up. What's the problem you face? You know, maybe when I face an obstacle, I shy away from it. It scares me. And then I have to find a way of coming back to it and back to it until I can find a way of conquering it. Because sometimes I let fear get the better of me, you know? So that's okay. Just discuss that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We got a few questions about casual interviews or and whether you can use what can you use in a casual interview or how do they run, and also technical interviews and whether you can still use stories in a technical interview.
Oh yeah. Well, again, bring back that idea of our friend Mazzy, who does process engineering. That's a very technical area. But again, he uses stories from his life and from his work that help people get a sense of who he is. So if he's talking about a technical thing, he can bring a story. We had some people in that same class that it was two guys who ran a technical company. They ran they built heavy equipment for the oil sands. And they were from Toronto, they were from outside of Toronto. And they had a situation where they shipped this thing up to Fort McMurray and something failed. And they talked about how what they did was get on a plane. In those days you could do that, get on a plane and get there as soon as they could. And they stayed with that machine until it was working beautifully. And they wanted people to know that, yes, that showed they had the technical skills to do what they were doing, but also that they valued their work, and this was their company. They said, we didn't want ever to have a machine that failed. So we had to figure out what was going on, and they did. And that, you know, when someone hears a story like that, you want to buy something from these guys because you want to use their equipment, because you know if that ever happened to you, they would be there for you. So again, technical stuff is often really, it's, you know, stories can help transfer the technical into the human, and that kind of thing does that. And also, if you're talking, you know, we often say this in interviews, not to use acronyms. So spell it out. Because again, oftentimes with things, you may use a particular terminology. Now, if you're talking to someone who's exactly like you and you can connect on that, but often in an interview, you'll have different types of people. So be careful that you don't get too technical and you don't use acronyms, that you're clear, that your language, your words are clear. And that means using those words.
Maybe just, John, did you have something to say?
No, I just want to reiterate, I totally agree. I mean, stories never go away. We did a program for a group called Quanzer, which is an engineering education firm. And they developed, actually probably U of A has their material in their engineering department. They developed material experiments for engineering labs. And it's very technical work. But in the end, people use this material. It's all about what the people and the people's experience and the end user's experience that matters. So I think it's important to, even in a technical interview, to try to make sure you have the human element.
Thank you. And I guess in the interest of time, I'll just ask one last question. What would be the one advice you'd give to anyone who's just starting, like finishing school and finishing grad school and trying to get that first interview? What would be your advice to them? And maybe Marcy and John, you could both give one advice. Yeah.
Well, can I say one thing I do? One thing we do in our courses is often, well, we've done at least, you know, teaching graduate students, when we have a bit of time, we get them to list their attributes. Like, what are you good at? And sometimes it takes people a while. It's like, oh, I'm not sure I know it. But you know, when you start doing this, you start saying, what do you like to do? So what are your interests and what are you good at? And I think when you put that down on paper and you actually look at it, you can see yourself somewhat objectively. And I I think before you go, applying for jobs or interviewing, you should have a really good sense of those things about yourself. And most of us never do this. When we were doing it with I know the first time we did the monk school, the students all said, I've never done this before. I've never actually put a sense of who I am and what I'm good at on a piece of paper. So it's a really good exercise. And then you could ask other people if you want to, how do they see you? What do they see you as good at? Because we all know none of us can perfectly see ourselves, but start with you. Start to talk about what you're good at. Like our friend who, got into Johns Hopkins because she could play Bach. I mean, she's a pianist and she worked really hard at being a pianist. Now she's almost a cardiologist, but she's at that point where that Bach is what got her into Johns Hopkins, apart from all the other wonderful things she'd done. So, look at the kinds of things you are good at, because that will help give you, first of all, a boost of confidence. It'll also help you start to tell some stories, develop some stories around those things.
Thank you.
My comment's a bit more mundane, but I think that one of the things you need to do is, when you're in that academic bubble, you need to be aware that, very few of you will actually stay in that bubble. So it's important to always look for ways of reaching out, which is why the S2BN is such an important vehicle. And we know that people hire people they know. So it's important. One of the questions I know you had is it too early to apply for jobs 6 months before graduation? Frankly, it's never too early. It depends on who you're applying for or who you're working with. Lots of people have jobs while they're actually in school. The more you can keep your foot in the working world, the better you'll be. I mean, because you want to make sure this is not this membrane between academia and business is permeable, and you can go back and forth, and you can make sure that you can transition. So it's important, very important, to find ways to keep your foot in the real world. So spend time volunteering, spend time working with other people. If you have an opportunity to do, as our friend did, work in a homeless shelter, and if you want to get into medicine, you might think that's actually the best way to get there. Try to get beyond just what you're doing now and build up a broader scope of things. So, and it may result in a job, it may not, but it'll certainly enhance your experiences and help you on your journey.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just want to say, finally, thank you both so much for doing this. Again, I've enjoyed it both times so much, and I really love hearing you talk about interviews and about telling your story. So I'd like to thank you both so much for agreeing to do this and for giving us your time. And of course, a thank you to BioAlberta for helping us with this series. It's been an amazing series, and we hope that we can host more of these series again in the future. Again, of course, thank you to our volunteers and our sponsors. Sorry, that went quickly. Thank you to all of our volunteers and our sponsors for 2020 and 2021. And again, I'd like to thank again my team. It's been an amazing team to work with, and thank you all for putting in the effort to put these series together. And thank you all for coming in today. And if you want to know more about our events, please visit our websites, follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We always post about our upcoming events on those platforms. And if you have any questions for our chapters, you can email us at yegstbn@ualberta.ca. And with that, I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. So thank you all.
Thank you, Mira. That was great.
Thank you, Mira.
It's a fantastic talk. Thank you.